So there will have been a tour of this sketchbook, but I'm going to show you how I actually made the sketchbook, because this is a sketchbook that I made back in, I think I actually made it at the end of August, but I started using it in September. And it's a mixture of papers. There's gray paper, there's even black paper. I have cold press and hot press paper. It's really just a mixture of papers, because I find when I'm working in different media, I like different papers to work on, especially if I'm using colored pencil. It goes really well on these gray papers. Really kind of pops, especially the white. And I've also been experimenting with printing monoprints and using that as backgrounds for things. And I just kind of liked how this went on the black paper. So, not going to do a tour because there's another video for the tour. But how did I make this? So, we're going to cut some paper. Now, this isn't, let's backtrack. I have a lot of pads of paper. When I'm doing watercolor, I like to work on blocks of paper because you don't get the warping as much, and you don't have to, prepare and stretch your watercolor if you're working on a block. It still, cockles a little bit, but it's not as pronounced as if you just took a sheet off a pad and started working on it. So I have a lot of sheets of paper. There was a really huge indigo sale that I have a video for that, where I got several pads of paper. The price was just too good to miss. I have been given pads of paper at the symposium, the Urban Sketchers Symposium. So there's that. I have a roll of paper that I bought for a project that I never actually used, and I can cut down from that. So there's a lot of paper around, and I also, like I said, like to have different types of paper on the go. Plus, the little sketchbooks that I've been using, the Stillman and Burns sketchbooks, of which I don't have one. I have all my sketchbooks put away. They've gone up in price, and in the summertime I go through sketchbooks really quickly, and so it was becoming kind of pricey. So why not put some skills to use? I've never really been, I've done a couple of bookbinding courses, but nothing, nothing too involved. So I was kind of learning from YouTube, good old YouTube, and looking up different things. And also, I've seen this done when I worked in conservation departments and things like that. So I have a little bit of a knowledge, not a lot. This, when you see how I do it, I wouldn't recommend this as something you would produce to give to someone, or actually, you can give it to someone. I wouldn't sell it like this. I would have done a different binding if I was going to sell it. It's really sturdy, turned out really well, but this isn't exactly the way that you'd want to do it. And when you're cutting down different papers, you don't get them as evenly cut. I did get my paper cutter recently service, got it, the blade sharpened. So that would have helped. I didn't have that when I was doing this. This was all cut by hand. But the paper does end up being kind of not exactly even. You can at the ends start to shave down. I did do that because there were some that were just really off, especially when you fold it. It kind of you have to be careful, it kind of goes askew. So it's not perfect, but I kind of like the fact that it's not. It has such a tactile feel to it, not being exactly perfect on the edge. And then this cover, I just did sort of like the Stillman Burns. It's just a heavy cardstock that goes over, and I got that at Above Ground in Toronto, but you'd be able to find anything like that in your local art store. And it's not very expensive. I think it came in a 16 by 20 sheet or something like that. And I just cut it down. And this is a little bit bigger than the Stillman Burns that I've been using, and that's kind of, I was kind of outgrowing that size. So, and I wanted it to also be a size that I could get more pages out of. So not too big, not too small. So that's kind of why it ended up being this size. And I'll measure it for you. I measured in centimeters because that's usually what I do. This is 14.5 centimeters by, it's a little off. As you can see, I was going for 12. You can see how far I went out. So it's just a little bit more than that. Or it is just a little over 4.5 inches by, I was aiming for 6, I think. So maybe the next one will be a little bit more exact. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to cut some paper. I'm going to decide on the paper that I want to use. I don't think I'm going to include black this time. I just wasn't using it as much as I would liked. So just change things up a little bit. I might add some Canton Mi-Tinte paper in so that I can work with pastel as well. I have some pastel in here, and I put, that's just swatching, I put glassine so that it wouldn't come off onto the opposite paper. But that's what happens. That's pastel right there. So let's get going. So for my last sketchbook, I used this pad that I got from the Indigo sale. It's Hanamulla watercolor paper, and they make absolutely beautiful paper of any sort. I've used it for photography and for watercolor as well. This one is acid free. It is natural white and cold press. It is not cotton, and that doesn't bother me. It's in the sketchbook. You know, it really doesn't bother me. It's 140 pound or 300 GSM. And this is a really large pad. I wouldn't take this out to sketch on. It's just too unwieldy. Doesn't fit in the purse. That's why this size is so great. And that's what I used for the watercolor portion of the sketchbook. So I'm going to stick with that. I don't have any hot press that is big enough. What you want to be able to do is, it has to be double this size, because I'll have to have a fold on one end. So it's not, I'm not looking for this size. I'm looking for that size. So this is perfect. And then some paper that I got. This is a, I don't know, class as a sketchbook, I guess it could be. Again, it is really big and very heavy. This is Stifflix, which is made in Italy. I haven't used this paper at all, actually. This came in the Urban Sketchers Symposium pack that we all got. And I know everyone else has raved about it, so I think I'm going to include a couple of sheets. It's a little bit, it's 154 pound, which doesn't, and 250 GSM. So it's a little bit thinner than the watercolor paper by Hahnemühle. I'm just going to use the white, and I think this will kind of take the place of maybe the hot press that I wanted to include but don't have. I'm trying not to purchase more paper for this project, because one of the things I wanted to do was use up paper. So I'm going to put this in. It's a little kind of bristly boardy. I know that's not a word, but it's got kind of a, not a glossy, but a very, very smooth appearance. So I'm not going to have too much of this. It does come in other colors, but I can't see myself using this color. Even the blue's a little bit too much. There's gray in it, and there's also black. But I'm going to use this gray instead. This is Clairefontaine, and that's the gray that I had in the first sketchbook. This is 115 pound 250 GSM, which is, I think that was a mistake on the back of that, because that's why I kind of paused. I think that's the wrong conversion there. So Clairefontaine Paint On, it's mixed media. It does take some wetness pretty well, and it's really nice. It's a really nice gray, very neutrally kind of gray. So I'm going to include that again, just because I was working on a project and I bought, this was hard to get at one point in Toronto. So when I was in New York, I bought this huge pack of it, but then I stopped working on that series. So I have a lot of it now. And then, like I said, there's the Canson Mi-Teinte pastel paper. My mom gave this to me. It has all different kind of colors. I think I may go for something neutral like that. I'm not sure about this brown. Maybe that cream, or even the lighter cream might be nice to include. So I'll put those in, and let's get cutting. So I'm just going to cut this down off of its spiral binding. You don't have to be that precise here, just so that I can work with it. I am going to try to be more precise about measuring and the cutting, especially now that I have the paper cutter. So the original plan was to have, I think, this be 6. I'm going to aim for that now. I will work in imperial measurements. And 4.5. So 6 by 4.5. So that means you want 12 for the length of it, because you'll be folding, and you want 4.5 for the width of it. So how many do I get if I do it? I can't do it that way because that's too small. I'll get more of it if I do it this way down. So the 12 will have to go from here so from here to here, that's 12, and then measure 4.5 down, and that's 9. So I don't think I would have done any better. If this had been 12, that would have been perfect. I would have maybe scrunched it down to 4s and then have more left over. But I always use the scrap anyways, so that will be fine. Then I like to use a T-square to mark my line. And I'm working from this edge rather than this edge because I know that's not even. You don't have to mark it with a line. You can just cut as well if you're using the T-square. Just lining it up as much as I can. There we go. That's actually 4 pages of the sketchbook already. Because I have the paper cutter, I'm not going to draw the lines out, but you'd want to do that maybe if you're just using a ruler so that you know that you're cutting straight and have the ruler lined up to that line. If you're using T-square, you can just mark just one line and then cut. But because I can keep this relatively straight, I'm going to do it this way. And then I know that I want 4.5. So just measuring to, 4.5. Making sure it's all lined up. There we go. So I've had this paper cutter since high school. I used to use it in my dark room at home. So it's been well used, and it really did need that trip to the knife sharpener. And then just 4.5 again. So the majority of the pages are going to be watercolor paper. And I'm just going to throw in a couple of pages this time of the different colors and different types. Because I know I'm just going to use mostly the watercolor paper. So counting up the number of watercolor pages that I had in this sketchbook, excluding the colored paper, I had 14 pages, or 14 spreads. I like to gather the two pages together to form a signature when you fold them. So these two sheets will become a signature. It makes it a lot easier just to have the two. Otherwise, it gets a little bit more difficult when you come to sewing. So I'll need then 14 sheets at least, and then we'll see where we are. This pad is just, is that long enough? Oh, so close. So like I said, I think I'll do maybe a page of that. And maybe a page of the little bit lighter cream. Well, when I say page, I mean these will be a few pages. Mark it off. This is thinner paper. I could have done more pages and cut them, but I think I'll play it safe. Just make sure they're all lined up. Much easier to cut. So now I'm on to the Clairefontaine Paint On paper in gray. So what you'll need for this project, or what I used, is some paper that you want to use up in the correct length, as we'll talk about. I like to have a T-square to get things really precise. You need a ruler, good sharp knife. If you have a paper cutter and your size will fit, this is invaluable. I love my paper cutter. You also need a bone folder, not real bone anymore, for folding the pages into signatures. You'll need bookbinding thread. This is waxed, along with needles to bind your pages. That's how I did it. And an awl. Now probably a sharp maybe nail or something like that could be used as well. And then I used gum book repair tape for the inside part, just to keep the cover nicely attached to it. And then PVA glue, preferably archival quality PVA glue, but I cheated and I used just regular PVA glue. And that's all you need. So now we'll move on. So now we have all of our paper cut, and it's time to start folding. And you'll want to keep things in, I like to keep them like with like, so the two grays go together because it's of a different weight. So I like to keep those together. And we'll just measure halfway along. So the length that I have is 12. Want to fold right at 6. Now you can do this a couple of ways. You can use your T-square and then fold it onto the edge there, and just get your bone folder. Now that's a little bit off, but you can work that into proper place. And just fold it like that. For thicker paper, you could also score it a little bit. Now this is just how I do things. I wouldn't say that this is the perfect way to do it, so please don't become irate if you're a paper person or a bookbinder saying that I've done this terribly, terribly wrong. You can just lightly score, and I mean lightly. It just makes it a little bit, eases the paper into a fold, like so. So now, as I said, I like to do just 2 sheets to form a signature, and then those will be layered on top of each other. So once again, this one's going to be a lot easier to fold. I'm going to fold into there. Make sure it's all nicely lined up. And I know my nails look horrendous. There we go. And just measure again. And I'm just, if you can see that, I'm just using the point there to score it along the edge of the T-square. And making sure it's where it's supposed to be. So again, this tucks inside this, and that's another signature. So we're building them up like that. And this is such a thinner paper that I'm just using my finger along the edge to do this one. So if you're not familiar with the Mi-Tinte paper, there's one side that has this texture on it. I don't know if you can really see it. And that helps with the pastel, but it gives helps give it a place to rest in. But it gives it a texture. If you want smoother look, then you can use the opposite side, which will be smoother. Now, I have this handy cutting mat, which I should be using to do my measuring. I'm going to put the darker one in the lighter one, or vice versa, it doesn't matter, just to vary the color, not have the two creams together. That goes on top. And then I'll just continue folding. Now the other way you could do it is just fold over and then work your bone folder down, but I think that just, it may throw it off, so I think it's always better to do the fold on something. Start the fold and then work into it. Especially on the watercolor paper. You probably get away with it with the Canson. But anything thicker you won't. It may just go off. And then you'll be back to trimming things, which is a pain to do and make it look nice. So it's better to work slowly and precisely instead of having a whole world of pain at the end of it. So now it comes to arranging your signatures into a book. I like to start the book with a heavier stock, so that's going to be the watercolor paper, and then have it ending with also the watercolor paper, just to give the spine that support, and the tape that I've used for the end pages. So I'm going to put the lighter ones, kind of put them in between maybe two of the watercolor paper signatures. And then maybe another watercolor signature, bracing it. Maybe the gray card there. More watercolor paper. Throw another watercolor paper. Then that. Now, I keep forgetting about this one. This Stiff Flex kind of bristle board paper. I'm going to put it in between these two signatures of the watercolor paper. Put watercolor paper there, and then Stiff Flex there, and then have two signatures of the watercolor paper at the end. So that is your book. Now on to using the awl. So this page here, you can see the way the thread goes in to the signatures. So that means there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes that you have to make. So for measurements, I'm going to do the 5 holes. So from the outer edge, I'm going to do 1/2 inch in. And same with here. And then I'm going to mark, I'm going to go back to metric. And that's about 9. So mark the center, 4.5. And then in between that is 2.25. Let's do 2.25. Right. Now, just push that right in the fold. And then just make sure it went through. I'm just lifting that a little bit. And that's kind of gone off. Okay. Back on track. And so I did the whole signature together. And so I'm just going to do that for the rest. You can mark them here down and then poke the holes from there, but I think I'm going to make sure that they're all exact. So I'm going to do the same measurements here. Oops. And then just keep going. So there's everything punched, holes put into the signatures, ready for stitching. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some bulldog clips around it, just until I get around to actually stitching the binding, just to flatten it. I don't have, you can buy presses that will press them down. I just use the bulldog clips all around the edge. There we go. I'm just going to leave that like that for overnight, or maybe even a couple of days before I start to stitch, just to flatten it down a little bit more. So now I've unclipped everything from the bulldog clips and it is pretty flat. So I think we can get started. So the best thing to use is really bookbinding thread. This one's wax, so it gives it a little bit more strength. It's not the color I would choose, but I bought, I'll put a link to it. I bought a little set for bookbinding, and it came with all the needles, the thread, and I think a little pair of scissors and a bone folder like that, which I don't use. I use my old bone folders. Anyways, so we got a knot in the bottom, and again, my nails are just terrible because I've been mixing so much paint lately. So excuse that, they're clean. So what we start with is we put our needle through this bottom hole. This is where you find out if you've actually put a big enough hole in. I don't double it up because this thread is so thick, but if you're using say regular like coat thread, you would probably double it up. So I go through there, and then down through here, and I've already made a mistake. No, I'm fine. That's fine. So you just do like you're stitching something together. Back through this hole. This is the inside. This is the outside spine. And then through there. And now you kind of complete that line. So through here, here, and back through the hole where the knot is. So when you're at the end, you want to do a hitch stitch, or knot, just to knot that up. Okay, so you go through there. And then there's your little knot. And then back through the hole. Okay. So now we can put the second signature on. So now you go into this hole, and there, and then you loop around these two first stitches to attach that on, and then you go back into the hole, and then you keep working your way up. Again through those two stitches, and back into the hole. I just go around here just once through the hole, and then once you get to the inside, you just loop it around. And then you do another one. And you keep doing that until you're finished. So you keep adding these on. And when you get to your final one, you just put a couple of hitches on the outside and you're good to go. So I'll keep doing this and spare you the pain of seeing me struggle with this. Just trying to get as tight as possible. This is a little bit, this is the almost like Bristol paper. So it's a little bit different, but it's fine. It doesn't really affect your stitching. It's just a little bit easier to work through the hole in this paper because it's not as thick. But it's the exact same actions. You just catch the, not this bottom stitch, but the one that is here. It'll be more apparent once you get moving up that I'm not going through these long stitches, I'm going through the little loops. I'll show that better. So we're a little further along and you'll be able to see it a bit better when I come out and I'm adding this next signature. I come under those loops. Oops. Right there. Before I go back in to the hole. So it kind of, you see it, it's kind of like a braid is forming on the spine. Sit back through this hole. And then under there. Now off camera I switched my needle because the needle was just too thick and it was really difficult to get in through these loops. And then we just keep going. So I'm at a point now where I don't have much thread left. You don't want to cut too much thread because it just gets in the way. If anyone's used to sewing, you kind of know that already. And I'm just going to knot this like that, like so. And then try to pull it through that hole so you don't have that knot. There we go, just popped. So the knot's on the outside. And just cut that off. Doesn't matter if it's a little bit long because it's going to be hidden by the cover and be all glued down. Now just cut some more thread. I have about that many more to go, so it's about almost over halfway. Now curved needle might help when it comes to looping under because there's wax, you can really, yeah, so it's not frayed. But because it is wax, I have wax all over my hands. And then just knot it like you did before. I give it a double knot. And then you just go in to the next hole. So because that was the end one, I went into the hole and then made a loop and came back out so that I can put the next signature on. And then it's back to regular programming. So now I'm at the last signature, and it's just like the others, except be making an extra knot right at the end. Back in. I'm just going to knot this off right here. And there you go. That is the book all together. So now we're going to move on to the cover and gluing it all down. I'm just going to tap it a little bit because it's kind of, things are a little off, but not much. So let's get to the cover. So I bought this heavy kind of almost card at a local art store called Above Ground, and obviously I have loads left. I did see Japanese linen cover material or cover paper, but I would have to order a load in, so I'm not going to do that. I want to use up what I have. That's the whole purpose, or one of the purposes for doing this, is to use up stuff that I have that I haven't been using. And so I'm going to cut this down, and it's going to have to wrap around, so it has to be long enough to do that. So unfortunately I had to roll the paper in order to store it, so it's kind of a bit wonky. And I kind of prefer this. It's not completely different, just a little bit different, but I think I'm going to work against that. I'm going to leave it a little bit longer, and I can trim that down just because when you put the glue on and everything, it kind of might shift a bit. So I'm just going to leave it a bit longer. But I'm going to fold, make sure I have that fold nice and sharp. That's where I get my old bone folder out again. Make sure that's on right, nice and tight. As tight as you can make it. I think that's where the next fold is. Go. Now we get the glue out. So this is where it can get a little messy because I'm going to put a lot of glue. Now I wouldn't recommend this as the bookbinders kind of thing to do. They have way better glue. This is just white glue. It's not, or PVA, it's not archival quality. But I'm not really expecting people to collect my sketchbooks after I'm gone, so it doesn't really have to last for eternity. And this is where I'm just going to place it into the spine as much as possible. And then I'm going to put these bulldog clips back on. Press, 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 press. Tight up against the binding or this cover as possible. Again, just keep pressing as much as possible. I'm just going to put, nope, I'm not going to do that. I am going to leave it like that, upright, pressing down just over here, just sitting on its spine, pressed as much as possible, and we'll leave it like that, probably overnight. So we're back. It's been a few days and it's not necessary to keep it that long. It's just I had other things to do. It was a weekend, and yeah, so that is firmly on there. We just have to trim down the cover, and then the last thing that I do is I get some of this bookbinding tape, so this is often put on the outside of the binding but I use it just to hang on there. This is the first one that I did. So I just use it to bind the cover to that first page, just to give it a little bit more support. Just cut that down there and cut 2 of those. So I'm just going to fold this on itself just to get a nice sharp edge. And then it has to be sprayed. It's gummed linen. You can use a brush, but instead of getting a brush mucky, I'll do that. I'm gonna wipe that up. Normally I would do it somewhere else so that this wouldn't get wet, but trying to do things on camera is a little bit different. So I'm just going to put that side right up against the edge. And use your bone folder just to press it down. So that's one side. You might have to fold it back a little bit. Then again, just put the edge right butted up against there. Whoops. And then I'm going to just clip that again so it dries nicely. Add some pressure to it. And we'll just wait for that to dry. So that's dried now. I just left it for a couple of hours and the watercolor paper sort of blots it dry itself. You'll notice that some pages are a little bit more difficult to open. Not so far. It might be the glue kind of got onto each page. But basically this one looks pretty good. Yep. Not really having to force any of the pages. They will go flat, which is also what I like. Yep, it looks like it's all pretty good. Sometimes at the back you get something, but looks like I did a neat job. It's a little bit of coming away there, but it's definitely intact. And so I trimmed down the cover pages and I'm going to just round the corners. When I worked in a paper conservation lab, we always rounded corners because it could cause damage to other things, and then also the corners themselves can get eaten up. So it just saves that, and it looks kind of nice. And finished. Ta-da! So again, that's not the best bookbinding. A bookbinder probably wouldn't do it like this, but it works for me, and I think it could work for you. And it's a really nice thing to have because it's then all made by you. The sketches inside are yours, but also you put together this book. And I hope that helps you use up some paper that maybe you bought. Now that I'm preparing for a show, I find full sheets of paper that I could have included in here that are all rolled up right now, but that'll be for the next time. And you can decorate this however you want. If you want to, I always put when I start and when I finish on the spine. And I think second time around, I definitely did a lot neater of a job. For one thing, I don't have to cut down, the pages aren't so off that I have to cut them down. I kind of like the rough edges here. It adds a little bit of something to it. And that's it. So I'll have a guide with some still images on my website to show you how to do it. If you need that kind of slowed down way to figure out how to do it. It's called a kettle stitch that I used for the binding, and it's really, really simple. Anyone can do it because I did it. So there you go. If you want to see more from the sketchbook to come, you can follow me on Instagram at Eileen Riley Arts, and check out my website. I always have sketchbook tours on there as well, or YouTube page as you found here. And subscribe and like so I can continue doing these things. Thanks so much. Bye.